In this video, we'll take a look at my latest eBay purchase. Not the PlayStation 2 itself, but this. This is Linux for the PlayStation 2, which was an official product released by Sony in 2002. It was more aimed for sort of development use, so you could actually develop games on your PS2, more sort of homebrew hobbyist thing. But yeah, this was actually an official kit released by Sony. So all I actually bought was the discs. The original kit came with a keyboard, a mouse, a hard drive, and also included a sort of PS2 to VGA adapter so you could connect it to a monitor. Whereas all I have is the discs, but I've bought the rest of the accessories so we can take a look at them later. So in this video we'll be installing it, getting it up and running, and seeing what it can do. So here we have the discs itself, which is a sort of very plain box. It's got tucks in the corner there. You see there's various stuff, so it's a proper licensed Sony product. It's not like the sort of stuff that was done later where people could hack it and run various Linux things on their PS2 like Yellow Dog Linux, which required special memory cards. This is a completely sort of official native solution. So we take a look in the box. We see we have two discs. The first one is labelled Runtime Environment. The second one is Software Packages. The way it works is you boot this Runtime Environment disk and that allows the machine to start up into Linux. And then the Software Packages disk is purely just for actually contains the operating system itself. It also includes a very simple manual here, which you don't really need much information from, but it just covers things such as how to install it, how to install the hard drive, things like that. So, as I said, it comes as a kit, so you don't get all the accessories. So I didn't get all the accessories I needed with my disc, because all I bought was the disc. So we'll take a look at the other bits you need. So obviously, first of all, you need a PlayStation 2 console. This is actually my own PS2 that I got when I was like 7 years old for Christmas in 2001. So I'm a bit paranoid about breaking this, but I've tried all the hardware and I've not had any problems, so hopefully we'll be fine. You also need a 8 meg memory card. This is used to store the sort of kernel and stuff for the operating system. So that's it there. I've labelled this one Linux so I don't forget. I also bought this one separately because even though I have plenty of memory cards, Linux will format the memory card and remove all the game saves. So it was £3 on eBay, so I bought that. You also need to be able to connect the hard drive up. So for that I bought an official Sony hard drive adapter / network interface. So this is a simple little adapter that provides a network Ethernet interface and also provides the ability to connect an ID hard drive onto here. This slots into the expansion bay on the back of the console. There was also an older version of this that included a sort of dial-up modem as well. That should also work. With both the memory card and the hard drive adapter, I bought the official Sony products. There's plenty aftermarket memory cards and also many aftermarket hard drive adapters, including one I saw that actually takes a SATA hard drive rather than an IDE one, although internally it'll just have a SATA to IDE converter. I decided not to, just because the Linux software is really fussy about hardware. It's built purely expecting a standard PlayStation 2 with one of these adapters and one of these memory cards. So my concern is if I started going into getting sort of funny off-brand adapters, that you might have compatibility issues. Now the other thing I mentioned is that the kit includes a VGA adapter. Now I couldn't find them on eBay for any reasonable price because it was never a common thing. It only worked with Linux, it didn't work with games. So what I decided to do instead is buy this. So when I use my PS2, I only used it with composite video. Now you can actually use composite with Linux. The trick is when you boot the disk, you have to hold down select and R2 to boot it into on the composite output. Select R2 is for PAL countries. Select R1, hold that if you're in an NTSC country. But the problem is on composite the quality is absolutely terrible. So instead I went and bought a cheap component cable. So this is just an aftermarket PS2 to component cable, which allows me to connect it to a sort of TV and get much better video quality out. What we'll also need to look at later though, is the problem is that the resolution when you boot into the graphics environment on this is too high for a standard TV's component input. So you need to use a monitor. So for that, I bought this, which is a cheap component to VGA adapter. We'll take a look at this later. It's not as simple as connecting this to a normal monitor due to the signals, but yeah, we'll take a look at that later, and I'll discuss how we actually make it work on the display. So let's get this all connected up and see it all work. So now let's fit the hard drive into the PlayStation. So I've got the hard drive adapter at the PlayStation and a hard drive here. This is an old 160 gig Seagate IDE drive. I originally tried another 40 gig Seagate and it wouldn't work. When you're booting Linux it would just say partition check and freeze. So it might be a little bit fussy with hard drives, but yeah, this one works. So yeah, maybe if you have problems with the hard drive and it freezes on that partition check thing, try a different drive, because I definitely had to do that. So, on the back of the console, turn it around, you'll see there's this expansion bay here. This is actually just a little cover that pops out, and that comes out. When I was younger, I always wondered what this was, because I'd seen it on the PlayStation, but I didn't actually know what did you put in there. So, yep, that's the hard drive bay. So what you now do is take the drive and take the adapter and simply line the connector and Molex connector up at the back and push it in. There's a little bit play in these connectors, so it will adjust to different sizes of drives, or at least spacing on the connectors. Once that's done, simply slide that into the back of the console, and it'll sort of roughly click to lock in place. Then all you need is to sort of screw these screws in. You can just use a coin for that, and yeah, that will fasten it into the console. So now let's try installing Linux. So the hard drive now is fitted into the PlayStation, which is connected to the mains power, the TV over component, and to the network over Ethernet. We're now also going to put the keyboard into the front USB port, and then we're also going to install our 8 meg memory card into memory card slot 1. So let's turn everything on. So we turn the TV on, and then we'll fire up the PlayStation as well. And now that's started, we'll go and put the disc in. So we open the tray. We first of all need the first disc, which is the runtime environment. So we'll put that disc into the machine. We'll watch it start up. And you get a normal intro there that you always get PlayStation 2 games. And then we'll see the runtime environment start. Okay, so here we are. So we can now install, boot an existing install, or go into rescue mode. Rescue mode is a bit like a live CD, it just starts up into Linux off the disk. So you can do that if you don't actually have the hard drive, just check your disks work. But what we want to do is install, so we can go along here to install, and then hit enter. And it'll just say, yeah, you need a keyboard, blah blah blah. Hit enter to OK. You can also use a controller for this, and it now asks you to change the disk. So we do that. What it seems to do is it wants to like verify both disks are working or something before you can actually do the install. So you have to swap the disks quite a few times. So now I'm going to check the second disk. So I'm going to load stuff from that. And it wants to change it again. Oh, that was close. It's now got a disc. But now it should start up. And there we go, now booting Linux. That's it detecting the hard drive. Here it's spinning up. And we're now in the installer. Something just feels wrong about having like a N-cursive based UI on a PlayStation 2. You keep looking over and going, wait, this is a PlayStation. So yeah, ask you to pick language, keyboard layout, and once again, change the disk, because it seems to really want you to change disks constantly. Do disk 2 in again. Then hit OK. It's very paranoid about checking the disks. Now here we are at the installer. So we hit OK. So we can pick what we want. You can either install Window Maker Workstation, which is a nice graphical interface, or you can install the server. So you can actually use a PS2 as a server. That's a very interesting concept. So we hit OK. Various tools partition to disk. You can use fdisk or disk druid, which is some sort of nicer UI. So we'll go into disk druid. Okay, so there's already a couple of partitions here. I'm just going to delete them just to show how to create them from fresh. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go and hit the disk and then go to delete, and then say we want to delete it. Do the same here. Do that one too. Yes. So now we need to add two partitions. We're going to add a swap partition and a regular root partition. So hit add. Mount point is going to be, well, I'll make this a swap to make it easier. How big do we make the swap? 100 128 meg, which is probably, I don't know, the machine's got 32 megs of RAM, so yeah, say it's swap partition, and then you want to install it to that, hit tab, and hit OK. So we now have a swap partition. So now let's create the root partition, so mounting point is going to be slash. I'm going to leave the size as 1 meg, and then I'm going to say go to fill the hard drive. And then we're now going to say OK. And there we go, that's now created the 100 odd meg swap partition, and then the 130 odd gig root partition. 130 gigs, like, that's ridiculous for this. I mean, it barely needs any disk at all, but it's the only hard drive I had spare. So we're going to hit OK, and that'll now start partitioning it. Not going to check for bad blocks because that'll take ages. Oh, so hostname. Now, do we come up with imaginative hostname for this machine like you do with servers? No, it's going to be PS2. Tell it to use DHCP. And there's now asking me to pick time zone, that will do. Password. People there better not be stealing my passwords because you can see the keyboard because this password totally isn't password. Oh, user ID. I'm just going to type all this stuff in. There's my user. Gives you the option to add multiple users, which is quite cool. And then all we need to do is hit OK, hit enter. Just leave all that as default. It's now starting to install. So that's just probed and found the graphics card. So we're going to say yes. Okay, I don't know why it's telling me that, but yes, cool, okay. So it needs to write partition table, so we'll say yes to that. Okay, so it's now ready to do the install, so we hit enter there, and it should start installing. And now as you can see, it's starting to install packages. So this will take a wee while, but it's quite cool because you actually get to see some of the packages as it installs. It will list what it's installing, and it installs quite a comprehensive suite of things. It's not just a bare Linux install. But then again, finding binaries for PS2 Linux probably isn't the easiest thing in the world. It's now starting to install some stuff, so we'll just leave this to do it. It says it's going to take 7 hours. It definitely does not take 7 hours. I think it's just the first few packages maybe take a little while, so it takes a little while for it to actually get the estimate properly. I think it takes more like half an hour to install. And that's the install process now finished. So it's now asking me to put a memory card in with no data. I've already done that, so we can hit enter, and that'll create a startup card. What it does is it uses the memory card to store the kernel of the operating system in some sort of boot configuration files, and then that's enough. There's enough information on that to then load the operating system from the hard drive. What's weird is that you still need to insert a disk to make it boot, so you have to put the disk in. The disk will then load from the memory card, and the memory card will then start booting the hard drive. It's a bit strange, but I'm sure there's probably some reason. You probably need the disk for sort of copy protection, so you couldn't share the disk amongst people. And then the memory card's probably there because it probably requires less drivers on the PS2 to access the memory card than it would be to access the hard drive. So the memory card can contain the appropriate drivers and software to allow the hard drive to be mounted. But there we go. So it says installation is complete. So now we need to put disk 1 in and restart the PS2. So now we've removed disk 2, we can just use disk 1, and that's the only disk we'll ever need again. Once it's installed, disk 1's what you need to start the system. So hit enter, or yeah, see if that reboots it. It seems to be sitting on the screen for quite a while, so I don't know if it's just this is the end. You have to manually reboot it. Does Control Delete work? Oh, that's kernel panicked it or something. Ooh dear. Okay. Let's just reset it. Hopefully that was enough. Hopefully it will just boot now. That's not broken it, hopefully. Okay, so now the install process is complete. We can now turn it on. So now it will start up from the disk, but this time from the runtime environment, we should be able to actually tell it to boot from the hard drive. There we go. Ooh, that's a bit... Those colours don't look right, do they? That's weird. Seems like it's just missing one of the video signals. Connectors look okay. That is a bit strange. I'm going to try and figure out why it's doing that. What if I turn the TV off and on again? Maybe just TV got a bit upset. It does that sometimes. Nope, it's still doing it. Okay, well, I'm going to go and try and figure out why it's doing those horrible colours before we actually try and boot it. Back in a minute. Hopefully. Okay, so I think I figured out the problem. What it seems to be a case of is when I did the initial boot without the memory card formatted or anything, it was booting up in sort of standard component video, so the TV was just happy to accept it. Whereas now after doing the install, it seems to be picking up some sort of configuration from somewhere, possibly the memory card, saying that it's to boot on a VGA monitor, which makes sense because the original kit was designed to run on a monitor. So what was happening is it was trying to output for the VGA adapter. That signal was being fed into the TV's component input, and the TV was sort of freaking out a little bit. I tried it on a different TV and it did the same thing. So what we're now going to do instead is we're going to connect the PS2 up to this monitor, which we needed to do anyway because the TV isn't high enough resolution to be able to get a decent sort of graphical environment out of it. So I'll show you how to connect this up. It's not that simple. So what we have is we have the component output from the PS2 on these cables. We're not going to use the audio in this case because there's no speakers, so we'll just use these three. And then what you now need to do is get the right connector. So I bought this on eBay. It's a very cheap adapter. It is component to VGA-ish. So what we can do is we can plug green to green, blue to blue, red to red. There is one problem with this. If you've watched my video on Next Station Turbo Color, you'll probably be familiar because I had the same issue there. The video the PlayStation outputs is called Sync on Green. That means that rather than having separate cables for the video sync signals which tell the monitor sort of how to scan the picture, they combine that sync signal on the green video cable. The problem with that is that modern LCD monitors don't support Sync on Green. It's explicitly stated in the instruction manual that you need to have a Sync on Green capable monitor, and the old sort of Sony website that was available at the time actually listed a compatibility list for many monitors to show what was compatible. Lots of CRT monitors are compatible. With LCDs it's quite uncommon, so we can't just plug this into the monitor. If I did, what would happen? The monitor would just stay in standby, it would never wake up, because it wouldn't be seeing those signals to tell it to wake up. So yeah, we need to separate those sync signals. So, again, if you've seen that video, you'll have seen this before, but this is my video sync separator that I built. It's built around a chip called an LM1881N. They're very cheap things, they're a few quid, and I sort of just wired it into this little box. It's not a huge complicated thing. I might take it apart one day and show how it's all built. Oh, that bit's fallen off. I need to find that. Oh god, I've lost that somewhere. But yeah, this is a fairly cheap thing to build. Cost me a few quid and it's quite handy. So what you do is you pass the signal from the PS2 in here. You get the VGA signal out here to the monitor. This also needs 5 volts of power, so I just chopped up a USB cable and attached that on. So yeah, we can just power over USB. And this is enough to power it up. There's lots of docs online on how to build it. I'll put an image on your screen of a circuit diagram and potentially try and remember to link in the description to some posts that detail how to make these adapters. But yeah, this is what you need to convert it to a normal monitor. So what we do is we plug the PS2 into this side and the standard monitor over the VGA cable into that side. And the PS2 is now correctly connected to this monitor. So we can just shovel this cable out late. And now all we need to do is get 5 volts of power. I'll just power it off the PS2, but since I'm going to plug a mouse in, I'm going to use a USB hub as well, just so we can actually run the mouse, keyboard and sync separator off the PS2. So it just goes in there, like that. Plug that in there. And finally, I'm going to just get a mouse, just so we can actually use the graphical environment. So, just a standard Logitech mouse, this works fine. I actually tried another Microsoft mouse previously. sort of, I think it was Microsoft Comfort 3000 or something, and it actually didn't work. It would only go up and down, which was very weird. So it's some weird compatibility issue, but this basic one seems to work. It's probably one of those things, keep it with the simplest mouse possible and it'll work fine. So yep, mouse is plugged in, keyboard's connected, it's all hooked up, should power the sync separator. So now let's turn it on and see if it works now. Let's turn it on there. You hear it start up. Now you'll notice at first the monitor sort of just goes a bit mental and won't actually display the PS2 starting. That's because the PS2 is currently outputting the standard component video that the TV was accepting, so the monitor doesn't have a clue what resolution it's being fed and gets really upset. I imagine if I got a better monitor it could actually display all these resolutions and it would be completely fine. I'm tempted to go and buy something really good that will handle all these old computers with random resolutions, because this thing can be a little bit fussy. I've got a really good one, but unfortunately it's at work. I don't really want to bring it home every time I want to make a video. But yeah, we can see it's now booted, because once we hit the graphical environment, well, the runtime environment, the resolution changes and it's now suitable for a monitor. So now we can hit boot from this screen. We can now pick whether we want to boot from the memory card, single user mode, emergency mode, or boot the kernel from the disk. Just hit memory card and it'll now start up. You can hear the hard drive kicking in there, and that's it booting. In 15 years of owning a PlayStation 2, I never realised it actually had a hard drive activity LED, which also makes sense because I've never had a hard drive in it before. But yep, down here, there's a little orange LED that flashes to indicate hard drive activity. So that's pretty cool. Interesting to see it's not actually built into the adapter or anything at the back, it is actually part of the console, and when you have the adapter in place it actually flashes. Okay, so we are now booted into PS2 Linux. So we can see it says PS2 Linux release 1.0, and the kernel is version 2.2.1. By contrast, my laptop is currently on 4.6, so yes, it's quite an old kernel. And we can see it says on a MIPS. MIPS is the processor architecture in this machine. We'll take a look at that and see what it actually is later. It's a bit cut off at the side. I'll try adjusting the monitor. Nah, it's not happy with that. Let's see what resolution this is. Oh, so yep, so you can see there, it is running at 640 by 480. That's quite low. When we go into the graphics environment, that will increase, and I'll try changing the config and see if I can actually get the native resolution. I kind of doubt it. Bit pushing it for PS2, trying to get it to output 1280 by 1024, but we'll see. So let's log in. So, and we're now at a bash prompt, which is pretty awesome. So now let's take a look at what we have here. So we'll take a look at the hardware. So proc CPU info, and here we can see the processor. So this machine has a MIPS CPU, and it's based on the MIPS R5900 core, which is very similar to the sort of R5000 core that we're using sort of Silicon Graphics and HP RISC machines and various machines around that sort of late 90s era for big Unix workstations. That's the architecture used here. We see here the system type is listed as EEPS2. EE stands for Expression Engine, which was the name of the actual processor in this machine. It wasn't advertised as the MIPS 5900, it was advertised as the Expression Engine, which is a whole sort of system on chip thing that I think includes like graphics processor and all that sort of stuff. So these machines don't have insanely powerful CPUs. The main thing with PS2 is that it's got an okay CPU, but really good graphics. So if you're writing a game for a PS2, you heavily optimise it for the graphics hardware in the machine, which is one of the main reasons of the PS2 Linux system, is so you can develop games that use that really powerful graphics hardware. So yep, that's the CPU. Let's take a look at the memory. Memory info. And we can see here we have 30 megs of RAM. I mean, the machine itself has 32 meg, so some will be reserved for stuff, so we actually have 30 megs of RAM. So, not much, especially given this was from 2001, 2000-ish. You know, most computers had more than that, but again, you'd heavily optimised for the PS2, you didn't really need to worry about the RAM. So what else do we have? Well, we can take a look at the version. Just gives us a bit more about the architecture. As we can see here, it's, yeah, GCC version, blah blah blah. Not particularly exciting, but there we can see the build was in the end of 2001. So let's see what else we have installed. We should have Vi, or Vim. There we've got Vim installed. Yep. What version is that? 5.6. What do I have on my laptop, out of interest? My laptop's running 7.4. Yeah, I don't know how quickly their versions change really. I think they've got Emacs as well. Yeah, we've got Emacs, and in true Emacs fashion, it takes ages to start up. So yep, you've got both text editors, well, both the sort of main text editors people fight over on here. This is where we watch as I forget to quit, forget how to quit. C. There we go, I remembered how to quit. Cool. So the command line stuff's pretty cool. What other things are there? We can, I don't know, press H. Yeah, you can see there you've got the full hard drive, 120 odd gigs available, using 800 odd meg. Not that surprising. The other quite cool thing, actually, if we go into CD into MNT, what you'll see here, you have CD-ROM, floppy, and then these two MC00 and MC10. These are actually the memory cards. So if I mount MC00, it'll say that's a PS2 memory card file system, and then sure enough, we CD into here. There's actually files on here. So this is where the kernel's stored and all the loader stuff is all stored in that memory card. And what we're looking at here is the memory card. Well, we should see that in here. Yeah, there we go. And you can see, there you go, straight away. There's the 8 meg PS2 memory card mounted as a file system under Linux. So that's pretty cool, you could store files on that. That's pretty awesome. But now, that's pretty exciting. But let's look at the really cool thing, which is the graphical environment. So all we need to do is run StartX. Takes a wee minute to load. And here we have the graphical environment. Okay, so we're now here in the graphical environment. However, it's quite low resolution, so we're going to try and change that. So let's see what it's running at now. There. Yeah, so we're currently running at 800 by 600. So we're going to try and increase that to actually suit the monitor. Might need to make it a little bit sharper. So we're going to exit it again. Exit there. And we're now going to go and change the X server settings. So we're going to sudo root, like that, and then we're going to edit a file. So the file is etc x11 xgsconfig. So this is a fairly standard xconfig file, but if we scroll down here, we can see where the resolutions are set. Here we are. So here we can see there's two different options for the display. There's either a 16-bit color depth or 24-bit color depth. As you can see, we're currently enabling the 24-bit color depth. This means the resolution options available, which are on this line here, is 800 by 600 or 640 by 480, which explains the low resolution. We could technically enable this line here, which would give us 1024 by 768, but that's still not high enough for this monitor, and I want to have it properly native resolution. So, we can see here though, in the modes list for the 16-bit color depth, we can get 1024 by 1280 by 1024. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the colour depth to 16-bit, sacrificing some colour, but instead it'll give us a full resolution of the monitor. So we can go up here, move that line there, and comment that one out. So we're now on a 16-bit colour depth. So if we quit that, go back to my user, and try starting X again. So here we are now back in the graphical environment. And as you can see, it is now much higher resolution. If we check the monitor, see what the monitor says, it is now running at the full 1280 by 1024 resolution. So that's definitely a lot better. Now you might notice some sort of ghosting on things like the mouse cursor and certain text. I think that's just because the amount of adapters I'm using is just ridiculous. And in particular, like the cables are very cheap. Like the component to VGA cable was literally the cheapest one I could find on eBay. It was like £3 delivered. So that's probably why the quality is not great. Also, because I'm using a long VGA cable and a long component cable and several adapters, there's a load of cable in there. So I apologise for the ghosting and the poor video quality. It should be, acceptable enough to be able to make the video on. So the window manager we're using here is called Window Maker, which is part of the GNU Step sort of desktop environment type thing. It's still being maintained today. You can still install Window Maker on a modern Linux box. And yet that's what's installed. There are other window managers we'll look at later, but Window Maker is the default one. So this is very similar to what's used in Next Step and OpenStep, so I'm fairly familiar with it. So as you can see here, we have the sort of paperclip menu thing here. Not quite sure what that is. But up here we can see we have the dock, which slides up and down. There's a calendar, which we can open up, somehow, or not. There's some sort of settings widget and various other things. So see what this is. Oh, so that's actually a terminal. And yep, standard bash prompt comes up. And this here, let's see what that is. This is the preferences utility. which if you see my next step video, it's actually very similar because it's sort of forked off of it almost. So you see here you've got various config on the top. Not going to spend ages looking at this, it's not very exciting, but yeah, this is how you configure system. Or at least the window manager anyway. Oh, I've opened things. Mouse settings, stuff like that. So yeah, that's what we have there. So now we can look at what applications we have installed. So if we right click the desktop, that pulls up this menu. There we have KTerm, that's just the window manager we saw before, or not the terminal we saw before. W3M, we have various options to have multiple workspaces. In graphics we have GIMP, so that's quite cool, so let's take a look at this. We fire that up. So want to do the first time installation, so we'll say yes, continue, it's now going to go. So GIMP is now loading. It's amazing to see how long it takes GIMP to load on this machine. Like, you know, open it on a modern machine, it just, you know, zips along and it's done. And you sort of think, what's the point of having a progress bar there? Well, when it was old enough here, it literally took this long to open. So we wait while it loads all those plugins for complete graphics excitement. And there we have GIMP on a PlayStation 2, which is something that still feels very wrong to be saying. That, like, I mean, Linux on a PS2, GIMP on a PS2, Bash on a PS2, all those things just seem like things that shouldn't exist, but somehow it does, thanks to Sony releasing the Linux kit. So yeah, I'm not going to show how GIMP works, I'm pretty sure most people watching this video know how it works, but yeah, we can hit OK. Oh yeah, and yeah, you can use GIMP to draw a picture, potentially. If I can remember how to work. I'm failing at working this, aren't I? I have forgotten how to work GIMP. That is a sad state of affairs. I've broken it. Anyway, yep, so that's GIMP. So you can use that to do image editing. So let's close all this down, quit, and we're closed. So let's see what else we have. Applications, we have XPDF, which is a PDF viewer. File runner, that's a file browser, or file manager, so we can open that up. Yes, yep, there we go. So we have this copyright 1999, that's the state-of-the-art technology we're having here. And yes, it's a sort of graphical file browser. And there, yeah, we're seeing the contents of the memory card. Can open that. Penguin.ico. I think I've upset it slightly, but that'll be the file that actually displays on the boot screen. That'll be the little Tux logo. Cool. So let's see what else we have. So, editors. We also have Emacs, Vi, and XGED. If you open Vi, there we get the, just opens in a terminal window. Is Emacs a bit more graphical? Sometimes it is. Of course, it's Emacs, takes ages to load, and the PS2 it's even worse. Yeah, there we go. So you actually got the more a slightly graphical Emacs install. So you've got like menus and stuff. That's quite cool. Never even heard of XGED. Yep, it's an old editor. That's definitely interesting. And of course, you get the typical calculator, type X11 stuff. I wonder, do you have XIs? So we can, KTerm, I did open that. Yep, hit run. XIs, do we have XIs? Yes, we have XIs, awesome. Yep, it's got all the old X11 applications on it. And one thing I spotted during the installation process that was quite cool is XChat. And yep, it seems to be doing something. Yep, it actually has the XChat IRC client installed. So let's see, can we connect to anything here? Is Freenode in this list? Notice we're a lot of very dead IRC networks here. Let's see, can we connect onto Freenode? Because the PS2 is connected to the network, so it should work. Okay. And can we make IRC work on this? Because I am still one of those weird people that uses IRC. Oh, it's doing something. Found your host name. I think we're connecting to IRC on a PlayStation 2 here. Yep, that has worked. We are running IRC on a PlayStation 2. That is definitely something. So you enjoy the channel. Yep, that is definitely working. IRC on a PlayStation 2. That is definitely something quite cool. So yeah. It's going. Anyway, let's not bother about playing with IRC. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so now let's try some web browsing on this. Unfortunately, the PS2 Linux build doesn't actually include a graphical browser out of the box. So instead we have to use Lynx, which comes pre-installed. So if you open a terminal and we run Lynx, -X, there we have a web browser. And it appears to have loaded some sort of locally hosted HTML file, I'm guessing, which has some Japanese stuff on it, and this is obviously the official website, it seems. Yeah, now trying to load that's just causing it to fail, because obviously that website's probably long gone. So let's try and load a new site. So G and let's go google.com. Allow the cookies. And there we have Google. So let's see, can we search for PlayStation 2 on this? Yep, and that Wikipedia. It's not letting you do HTTPS. But yeah, there we go. Computer history has something on it. And there we have it. We have actually searched for the PlayStation 2 on a PlayStation 2. That's quite cool. So one thing I now want to try is apparently on a mirror of the old original PS2 website, there's downloads for Mozilla. So that could be quite cool to try and download. So I'm going to put the URL in. The original website is down. It used to be PlayStation2-Linux.com. However, someone seems to have mirrored it, so we're going to try and use that. So let's go to that. So it is on ps2linux.info/playstation2-linux.com/. Yep. So here we now loaded up the original PS2 Linux website, or a mirror of it, and down the bottom you can see we have these files. So there's Mozilla for PS2. That's the latest build there. Firefox 2.0, ENUS, and for MIPS architecture. So that's what we need. So see if this actually works. Just asked me to download it. It's downloading. 300 kilobytes a second. So I guess we just wait for this to download and see if we can run Firefox on a PlayStation 2. That also sounds so wrong. So we're going to save to disk, enter file name, that'll do. Oh, why has it done that? Cannot write to file. Why are you not doing that? Right. What path is it trying to save to? tmp/firefox.tar.gz. Okay, that seems to have worked, so can we now open another terminal and run that? So kterm cd/temp, nice, cool, Firefox. Does not look like a tar archive. Have I done the raw file? Well, it's definitely a tar archive. Well, that's annoying. Wait a second, stupid old versions of tar need to tell that it's compressed. There we go. It's one of those things you sort of forget when you use modern Unix systems, and then you go back to the old days and you're like, actually I was technically doing that wrong. The modern versions of the program just cope with giving it a gzip thing without telling it it's gzipped, whereas the old version here doesn't. But there we go. Let's see, so cd Firefox. Do we have a binary? We have a binary for Firefox. Will this actually work? I'll be amazed. It's thinking about it. The hard drive's going away like mental. There's no errors coming out, so will this actually run Firefox on a PlayStation 2? Because that would be so cool. It's definitely taking its time. Seems to conk out there. That's disappointing. Okay, so Firefox was a bit of a fail, but I found another download on that website for Mozilla version 1.7, and this claims to be an installer, so this might actually, install appropriate dependencies or whatever. So let's try that. So, try on that, Mozilla installer, see what happens here. Hard drive's going in. Oh, that looks a bit more positive. Well, at the very least we've launched an application downloaded from the internet, which is quite nice. Navigator, yes, Navigator only, try and make it install as quick as possible. Yes. Cannot make destination directory. Because I'm not root. Okay. Oops. Let's try that again. I've broken it now. Close. So. Let's try that. So now we're doing this as root. This might actually work. So we'll go through again, do that. Just install Navigator. Next. Yes. Now we're installing Mozilla. Now let's see, will this actually work? That whole mirror of the PS2 Linux website, I'll put a link to it. It's actually really cool. It's got so many downloads for various things. There's Mozilla, there's Firefox, SeaMonkey, and tons of other files. So yeah, if you ever sort of want to find files for a PlayStation 2 if you're running Linux, this website definitely has a lot of stuff on it. Ah, it's failed. What? Talkback.xpi failed to install. Nah, I think that's just some feedback thing. Hopefully it'll still work without that, ignoring that error. Completing installation. Okay, it's done something. Okay, so now Mozilla's installed. Let's try and run it and see if we can load the web page. So, it installs to user local Mozilla. And let's see what we have in here. Oh, we have a file called runmozilla.sh. Let's see if this works. And it's doing something, there's definitely disk activity there. So let's see if this actually gets us Mozilla. See if we can load any web pages on it. Oh, we're loading something. Yep, that definitely looks like Mozilla loading. It's probably going to fail to load the home page. Oh, that's a security warning. Okay. But yeah, it's definitely trying to load the page. Oh, more certificate errors. Okay. Server certificate not yet valid. I'm guessing the data on the machine's wrong. Oh, and there we go. We have actually loaded a web page on a PlayStation 2, which still sounds extremely wrong. So according to here, I'm browsing freely with the latest version of Firefox. I'm also to update it, and I'm using the latest version. Don't think that website's loaded properly, but yeah, that is definitely the Mozilla homepage on a PlayStation 2. So we can stop that and see if we can load something else. It's incredibly sluggish. I don't think the 32 megs of RAM really helps this machine. It's, you know, trying to load a web browser, it's just 32 megs of RAM really isn't enough for stuff like this. Oh god. That didn't quite work, did it? Let's try and load Google. It's connecting again. Seems to be doing something. Oh, more security warnings. Yes, I know. And there we have it. That is Google on a PlayStation 2. It's just so wrong. But yeah, that has actually loaded. Can we search for something? Oh wow, even the JavaScript seems to be working because it's loading this up. That's pretty awesome. Obviously it's incredibly slow. But more security warnings, but it seems to be trying. It's definitely trying alright. Yep, there we go, I have done a Google search for PlayStation 2. Probably load a Wikipedia article in it. See if that works. Although it's not that exciting browsing the internet, we all know what the internet looks like. And I am running critically low on camera memory space. I will need to hurry up a little bit because I have 12 minutes remaining. Oh dear, I've not got and that card, all the card has is this video. So yeah. Yeah, we have successfully used Mozilla on a PlayStation 2. Now I could go on for hours about PS2 Linux and show off all different games and demos that people have made for it, but I want to just keep this about the operating system in general, and if people want to see, you know, various applications running on this, I can make a future video on it. So I think the final thing we'll take a look at is the various window managers available. So of course it's got Window Maker, but there are other ones. So if we right click desktop and open, well, run, we can run an application that's installed called SDR. This allows you to configure the graphical environment, but you can change the language, change the input method, but also change the session. So as you can see it's Window Maker, so we can try different ones. So there's FVWM2, so we'll try that one. So again, if you change that, you simply exit, and then you can, when you next start X, you'll get the new environment. And here we're now in FVWM2, so you've got this sort of docked in here with multiple workspace support. And again, you sort of left click and that'll open various terminals. There's Xterm. We can go down to another environment here, we can say we want to, through here we want to load calculator. And there's our multiple workspaces. So that's FVWM. I'm not going to go into these in great detail, I'm just going to quickly show them off. So let's see what else can we run. Utilities, yeah, various stuff in here. So let's try and run SDR again, and try the next one. Next up we will try Sawmill. No idea what that is, never heard of it, but it could be interesting. So let's see what happens. Is that loaded? Oh no, it's not doing that. Okay, so this appears to be Sawmill. I've never heard of this before. Literally all that happens when I hold the middle button and the mouse down, this menu comes up. And yeah, we can open Kterm and like, what else? Yeah, I'll open GIMP, it's quite a fancy application. But yeah, this actually looks relatively modern. Like, if you look at the window title bars here, they're actually sort of, you know, styled and coloured. Don't know what this is. This could be quite modern. But yeah, that is the Sawmill desktop environment. So we'll quit out of GIMP because that's close, and then we'll try the next one. Next up we have TWM. This is obviously a very old window manager with people have probably used before. I've definitely had to use it when installing very bare bones Linux installs. But yep, start Art X there. See what we get. Of course it's TWM, so there's basically nothing there. You know, you still get the cross cursor. You can do that. It's, yeah, it's TWM. It's not that exciting. Oh, so then you need to actually change the desktop environment to something else. Oops. So we need to actually launch terminal to run SDR. And the issue here is I can't see a way to launch a terminal here. And I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so it turns out that SDR program has a command line interface. So we can try that. And through here we can actually now change the desktop environment to something that might let us actually open applications. It'll just because TWM isn't configured properly. Start X again. And this is whatever that last one was, for what it's called. Ah yes, this is like this is basically TWM, but it's actually got proper configuration now. This is what they're calling XSM. But yeah, this is a slightly more usable version of TWM. So yeah, we can now, well, change it back to Window Maker and wrap this up. So here we are now back in Window Maker. So let's now shut the machine down. So just open a terminal, power off. It's going to ask for a password. Do that, and now it should shut down. And it's off. I particularly like the little message at the end that just said bye. So there you have it. That was a look at the official PlayStation 2 Linux kit. It's definitely one of the most interesting things I've looked at, just to see what a PlayStation 2 can do. You know, way more than I ever dreamed it would when I got mine. And yeah, it's very interesting to look at. I'm definitely looking forward to looking at this more and seeing what else I can make it do and see what other programs I can run on it and stuff. So yeah, if I find anything else out interesting, I'll definitely make a video on that. So yeah, thank you very much for watching.